Today, let me move this down just a little bit. There we go. There's a lot of people in the community to thank as well. Brad, Holt, and all of the VFW members here, we thank you for welcoming us and wanting to be a part of this day with us as we honor Mr. James Meredith with our first Freedom Trail marker in our county. Good afternoon. My name is Kim Terrell. I'm your Director of Tourism for DeSoto County. Mr. and Mrs. Meredith, we're very glad that you could make it here, come up from Jackson. We do appreciate that. There are several people in the community that helped us get here today. Andy, Mike, and their crew that made sure we got the marker up. We appreciate it because without them, that just simply wasn't going to happen. We've got some elected officials I'd like to acknowledge. On our supervisors, Mr. Michael Lee is on the program, so he's here. Mr. Bill Russell, you are here somewhere. I've seen you, my friend. There you are. For our mayors, I know that Mayor Chip Johnson is sitting right here. Scott Phillips from Olive Branch, thank you for being here, my hometown right there. And I know that Alan Latimer could not be here. Whoa, that's going in and out. Could not be here, but Jim Robinson is here in his place. So if Is Muscle White here?
Yeah,
where is it? Did I miss him? There he is. Put you on the spot. Thank you, Mayor Muscle White, for being here from South Haven. We've got several, I think we've got several aldermen. If I've missed an elected official, would kind of our alderman or anyone else just kind of give us a wave, please, and let everybody know you're here. Thank you so much, because we do appreciate all of you guys being here with our elected officials. Certainly, I want to thank Mary Margaret White, who is from our state tourism office, Visit Mississippi. She is the Bureau Manager of Creative Economy. She works with all of us as communities that have these markers, whether they're blues markers, country music markers, literary markers, and now, of course, our Freedom Trails marker. And I appreciate everything she's done to make sure all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. She's got us all in order, so we're in good shape. Mr. Meredith, we are honored that you could be here today to unveil this Freedom Trail marker and commemorating your march down Highway 51 over 50 years ago. There are others who will speak and can tell personal stories. What I know is that Mr. Meredith is a civil rights pioneer, an author of many books, and what I did not know until a few weeks ago is he is an Air Force veteran. On a quick side note, my dad is still 92 years old with us. He's a World War II veteran. He joined the Navy 10 days after Pearl Harbor. He was 17 years old. And as we were talking earlier when I said the VFW members, one of the fellas talked about being combat veterans, and that's something that my dad takes great pride in, is being a combat veteran. So to all of our veterans, whether you're combat, however you served, on the day before Veterans Day, we say thank you so much. Just a couple of quick notes before our speakers come up. When we're through with this and we have the unveiling and we do all of the pictures, we're going to go right inside the VFW. They have so graciously set everything up for us. We're going to have a little cake, a little water. We've got some tea, a little something if you feel a little parched. They've got everything ready. Miss Vicki is in there and has got everything under control. If you have not, one more quick thing in housekeeping. This thing goes, I'm sorry. If you haven't turned off your cell phones, would you please grab those and turn them off? Because we could be in the middle of one of these great people up here speaking, and we sure don't want to be interrupted with that. On the program, each of our speakers will come up in order so they can introduce themselves as they come up. So as you see people come up, you'll know who they are. I thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, which is going to be our supervisor, Michael Lee.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And also on behalf of the DeSoto County Board of Supervisors, we're glad to be here in DeSoto County. Such a beautiful day today. I'm going to tell a story, and it seems like every event here, I've lived here, and somebody says, Michael Lee, you have so many stories about DeSoto County. Have you been here all your life? And I said, not yet. Thank goodness. I'm still here, thank God. One of my stories, and I barely mentioned it to Mr. Meredith just a while ago, when I was a boy, just a few miles up the road, there was a feed mill. Most of you who have lived here know about Hopper's Feed Mill. And my daddy was a local barber here, a local businessman, and they built a house right on the hill above Hopper's Feed Mill. And the event was happening and unfolding, and my daddy called my mother and said, I want you to take the boys, which would be myself and my brother and my little sister. My sister was not born yet. And I remember this vividly because she said, and she looked at us right in the face when my mother grabbed you by the face and said, remember this. You remembered it. And the march was happening. And my daddy wanted us to go out on the front porch and watch when the march came by, the Civil Rights March. And we waited, and it never did come by. And then the phone rang, and my daddy called and said, get the boys in the house. Mr. Meredith had been shot. And I remember that. And that was, we talked about my gray hair and how long ago that was, and that's what we were kind of laughing about. But I was about 6 years old when that happened. And I do remember it. And it's an honor, and it's history. And this is what's going on right now today is history. As a 5-6-year-old little boy can remember what his mother and what happened so many years ago, this is long coming. It's too long for this to happen and for this marker to be here. But we are here for that. And it's an honor. And Mr. Meredith, I hate I didn't get to see you walk by because I was sitting up there waiting on you. And but I'm glad you're here today, and I can see you, and I want to thank you and apologize to you. And it's so great that the unity of this country is what it's all about, and that's what God's intention was, for everyone to be united. And this right here, just by the people here and the ones present and diversity here, that's what it's about. That's what it will always be about. That's what it will be about when we're gone, and I'm not here on this earth anymore. It'll all be about unity in one place. And on behalf of the Board of Supervisors of DeSoto County, we welcome you. We're glad you're back, and we thank you with all our hearts. Thank you. Now, the next remarks are going to be from the Director of the Museum, Mr. Brian Hicks.
Thank you, Michael. This is a long day, long in coming. My involvement started almost 15 years ago. I had a group of Japanese tourists coming through the museum who were interested in civil rights in America. And they were going to places throughout America where civil rights events had occurred. And they wanted to come to DeSoto County to see where James Meredith had been shot. They came to the museum, I gave them a tour through, and the best I could do was to tell them, well, turn at the courthouse, go down the road till you see a big tank, and it's just a little bit further. There was no marker. There's nothing at that time to mark this important place. And that day I decided that we needed to have a historic marker. And we started our dialogue with the state, working at coming up with ideas of a state marker. And about that same time, they started the ideas of having a civil rights trail throughout the state. And we said, well, let's make it part of that. And that's why we're here today. A conversation that 15 years ago led to this. Going back a little further to give you an idea of what happened here in 1966 was Mr. Meredith's walk through Mississippi. He told me several years ago that it wasn't a march, it was a walk, one man's walk. He had already integrated Ole Miss. He had integrated the United States Air Force. And now he had turned his attention to allowing people to have the simple right to vote in the state of Mississippi. Jim Crow laws that had been enacted for so much of the 20th century had barred African Americans from voting throughout the state. And he wanted to show to the world that a black man could walk through the state of Mississippi and encourage African Americans to vote along the way. He started in Memphis on June 5th, 1966, left the city of Memphis traveling down Highway 51, got to the state line and spent the night there. Got up the next morning and continued his trek down the highway through DeSoto County. It was a very, very hot afternoon of June 6th. If you can remember those days in June, it's a lot hotter than this, and that heat had something to do with some of the events of that day. The sheriff's department escorted him through the county. We had one sheriff and one deputy in those days, and they got him around the square and started south of the square out of the county, and the sheriff sighed a sigh of relief that nothing that had happened to Mr. Meredith while he was through DeSoto County, because he was on his way to Tate County and out of their responsibility. Meanwhile, the photographer, who was 26 years old, named Jack Thornell, was walking with Mr. Meredith and jumped in a car and gotten a little bit ahead of him, and was extremely hot, and decided to pull off and grab a Coke at the local little gas station there on the side of the road, because he knew that was the last gas station before they got to the big town of Coldwater. And so he pulled over to the side of the road drinking that ice-cold Coke and waited for Mr. Meredith to catch back up with him. And that's when the events took an ominous turn for the day. As James came by him, Jack Thornell got out of the car, grabbed his camera, and just as that moment, he heard a man scream out, "James! James Meredith, I want you!" And as Mr. Meredith turned to look at the man that had called out his name, the man pointed a 16-gauge shotgun at him across the highway and shot 3 times. Those bullets peppered his chest, and he fell to the ground wounded. The photographer snapped pictures as it was happening. For the first time in American history, we had a photograph of the assailant actually committing the assault on a national hero. The photographer took 2 rolls of film that day. One of those was as James Meredith fell to the ground bleeding, trying to duck the bullets. That photograph hangs in our museum and other museums throughout the world because it's one of the most iconic images of the civil rights movement. In 1967, that photograph won the Pulitzer Prize for photography. Many folks say the anguish that you can see in James Meredith's face as he's been shot falling to the ground summarizes the anguish of the entire African American population during those times. As James Meredith lay there wounded, bleeding on the side of the highway, the man who had shot him stood up, put the gun down, and just waited to be arrested. The sheriff came running back up to the scene, grabbed the man by the arm, he did not resist, and was put in a patrol car and taken back to Hernando to jail. As James Meredith lay there wounded, the call went to Hernando that he had been shot. In those days, we didn't have an ambulance service. You had to call the funeral home, and they sent the hearse to take you to the hospital. And that caused some confusion, because as the hearse pulled up, a lot of the media thought he had been killed, and they went out on the AP wires that James Meredith had been killed in Hernando, Mississippi. Luckily, he was only wounded. The ambulance took him to Memphis to the hospital, where they were able to save his life, and he waited there and recuperated. The man who shot him was escorted to jail, pled guilty, and served 18 months of a 5-year sentence for attempted murder of this man. Dr. Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders came to that hospital room that night and stood around the bed of James Meredith and decided that they would not allow this march, this walk through Mississippi to end with this tragedy. They decided to continue that march the very next day. Dr. King, Stokely Carmichael, and other civil rights leaders came right back to this spot and restarted his walk. It took them another 3 weeks to get to Jackson. By that point, James Meredith was able to get out of the hospital and to meet him, as well as 12,000 other folks that had joined that march down Highway 51. They stood on the steps of the old Capitol and encouraged African Americans to exercise their rights to vote. That became the largest civil rights demonstration in the state's history, and all because of the events that occurred right here in DeSoto County. I got to first meet James Meredith in 1996, when for the very first time since those days, on the exact 30th anniversary, he came back to DeSoto County to re-walk those steps where he had been shot 30 years earlier. He started at the Court Square and came right back to this place to show the difference in 30 years. In those 30 years, a lot of things have changed. And one of the most obvious signs to me as a young man who got to walk with him was that he was escorted by an African-American deputy down the center of the highway. They stopped all the traffic for him, where in 1966 he was not allowed to walk on the pavement. In 2014, he came back for the second time. We got to meet him again. Came for a book signing at the Hernando Library. And then last year, Rob Long and I, who was our next speaker, got to meet him and spend a couple of weeks with him out west in Idaho and Washington, traveling to different universities, telling the story of James Meredith and his integration of Ole Miss and the tragedies that struck him here in DeSoto County. But we didn't leave it there. We brought it up to what has happened in all those 40, 50 years now that have changed. A lot of things have changed in those 50 years. I think Mr. Meredith sums it up best in his book, and I like to quote him on this. He says, "In spite of it all, I have learned that, as my father said, these people can be decent. The people who wanted me dead in '62 and those who rebuked me in 1966 have transformed into a different people. Or maybe they have found something in themselves that they did not know that was there before. Today we stand here a changed people, not one rebuking him, not one that is spitting on him, not one that is trying to shoot him, but one who is here to honor him." Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to our mayor, Mayor Chip Johnson.
Well, I am Chip Johnson. I'm the mayor of this great town of Hernando, and my job here today is to do a welcome. I'm also a life member of this VFW post, and I want to start by thanking our commander of the post and the leadership and the members for making this possible. I think this is a very fitting place to erect a monument to someone who is also a veteran of the United States Air Force. And I think it'll be a good place for it to be. People can actually pull off and park safely, spend time here with their family, and learn about this history. We just heard Brian talk about the transformation within people and how opinions change. And I would dare to say there are many here in this audience who over their lifetime have had their opinions on equality and race relations to change. And I think that the work that a lot of the civil rights leaders and Mr. Meredith have done gets us one generation closer to us not having people who have to change their mind because they're taught it from birth. Because of people like this who have led the way and changed the minds along the way. So this is going to be the shortest speaking I've ever done. I really do just want to welcome. I've spent a lot of time reading about Mr. Meredith in the last week, and I am not going to speak for him by any means, but one of the things I've gleaned from my reading, the important thing to me that seemed to stand out was that it felt like Mr. Meredith was never asking for anything above and beyond. He just wanted to be equal. No special rights, just equal rights. And I think that's what we're all shooting for. And so, on behalf of the citizens of Hernando, we would like to welcome you today and make sure you know that you are no less welcome in Hernando or no more welcome in Hernando than any other man, woman, or child. But Mr. Meredith, today you are equally welcome in Hernando as any man. And we appreciate you being here.
You know, I'm reminded as I look around here and I see this crowd here, what my friend Billy Morris used to say about a confluence of history. Supervisor Lee has shared with us his memories of when he remembered that day when Mr. Meredith's life was almost taken from us. I met Mr. James Meredith when I was 17 years old. I was writing a history paper at my school. And not only did I interview Mr. Meredith, but I had the chance to interview Governor Barnett. This was 1982. So it was the 20th anniversary of Mr. Meredith's integration at the University of Mississippi. I grew up with the name of James Meredith in my household because my father, Bob, worked on the 8th floor of the Woolfolk State Office Building in Jackson. Now, if you read your history books, you know that is where Mr. Meredith first attempted to enroll at Ole Miss. The college registration office was actually located in the Woolfolk Building. And I've got a picture of my father looking out at the sea of cameras outside the Woolfolk Building on North State Street in Jackson. The BBC was there and ABC. We just had 3 television networks for any young people out there. But the thing about that I can recall that my mother talking about is that there were so many news media, which my dad still is chagrined the fact that I joined the Fourth Estate, but that's another subject. But there were so many news media, he could not eat his lunch that day, because the news media was kind of camped out, I believe, in the cafeteria. So I remember my dad kind of grousing about the fact he didn't get to eat his lunch that day. But you think about the walkers who walk down this highway that's right here in the blistering hot sun, their shoes probably worn from walking the distance. They were hot and tired. They would be refused accommodations in any hotels at the time, and they were given fields to lay out in at night. Dr. McLemore can probably share some of his stories from that era. But I think back upon this day and where we are today. And I'm one of these people who, I love history and I like to look back, but I also like to look forward. And I think if Dr. King were here and other people were here, they would highlight the fact that, yes, we have indeed come a long way, but we still have so far to go. And I would echo what Mayor Johnson has said. Hopefully there will be a day when it will be commonplace that any person, regardless of the color of their skin, their religious affiliation, who they are as a person, that they will be given the equal rights that were given to them by their Creator, that indeed are promised in our Declaration of Independence. We went out west, Brian, myself, Dr. Lisa Manning, and others, and we took the message that as a group of Mississippians, that if Mississippi can change, that the world can change. And that if Mississippi can come to terms with its past, that America can come to terms with its past. But you need a leader, you need someone courageous. And I can remember Mr. Meredith and I having this conversation that his journey was to enable African Americans to vote, but it was a walk against fear, because fear is a crippling thing. You can never take that first step if you're crippled by fear. And there are warriors in this world who show us that truly the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. When Mr. Meredith walked down this highway, he was armed with two things: a Bible and an African walking stick. Those were the two things. Now, we had a conversation earlier at the restaurant that he lost that walking stick. I'm going to see if we can't find that. We think we may have some leads on that walking stick. But I do know that what perhaps was his most valuable possession was inside of him. And that is something that very few people have in this world, and that is true courage and true fearlessness, and having a fierce conviction that you're here on this earth for a reason. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no mistake, it is no happenstance that James Meredith is alive here today, some 50 years after the fact that someone tried to end his life. It is what William Faulkner said: I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He will prevail because he has a soul capable of compassion, pity, sacrifice, and endurance. And ladies and gentlemen, it is those intangible things that enable us to endure as a common species. We are all members of the human race. We are, what the late President John F. Kennedy said, human beings who are mortal. We all breathe the same air. We all have the same aspirations for our children. I turn the lectern over to a man who indeed showed all of us what courage truly means. A man who is humble, a man who is devout in his spiritual beliefs, a man who believes in young people, a man who believes in this country, a man who believes in the human race. It is my distinct honor and my high privilege to turn the lectern over to Mr. James Meredith.
James Meredith was a bad dude. my God been telling me for many years. James Meredith, you talk too much and don't do enough work. And what I've agreed to do the rest of my life is just say what he authorized me to say. I promised I was going to do that, but I ain't never been able to, so these fellas had me to write down a few notes that I'm going to say before I get to what I promised God I was going to do. First of all, I've seen a lot of pictures of James Meredith. The one that you are looking at in the brochure, actually, the first time I ever saw this picture was in June of this year in Time magazine. But this is actually the beginning of the day that I was shot, because we came to the Tennessee line the first day and we started, and this picture here represent the best picture. I always wanted to look like, see, I look like a bad dude on the I mean, you understand, but that's just a little bit before I was almost no man at all any longer. So, but I understand why God shut me up. I sure talk too much. But I do first want to thank the veterans of foreign wars. We used to call it the VFW, for letting this happen. And I went to the museum this morning, and I was impressed beyond belief, and recommend anybody who have not been to Brian Hicks Museum, you should go there. And have to do a little promotion here. I've heard it mentioned a few times that I've written several books. I didn't bring but two of them with me, but whenever we go up there in the building, anybody that want one can buy it, and I'd be glad to autograph it. I do want to say this about Mississippi. Mississippi is the center of the universe. Mississippi is the center of the black, white, rich, poor universe. If Mississippi can't come up with a solution to the problems of the day, it can't be done. And I'm very confident that it's going to get done. It looks like everything. This is all I'm ever supposed to say. It's what I'm fixing to say now. And I'm going to wait till the television crew gets set, because I want to make sure that if they say anything that I said today, they say this. My name is James Meredith. I am a prophet like Moses. My mission from God is to tell my black people in Mississippi that we must create a new focus on good and right. The black elders must first live by the 10 Commandments, and second, teach the 10 Commandments to all the people. Thank you. After hearing from the prophet James Howard Meredith, there's not much to say after that. That's right. My name is Leslie Burrell McLemore, and I was born in this county, grew up in this county, graduated from Delta Center High School. When James Howard Meredith was shot, I was 25 years old and a graduate student at the University of Massachusetts. I am just so pleased that James could come today and spend time in DeSoto County. I was at the unveiling of the marker in Jackson at the end of the march, and he was not there, but he came to DeSoto County. So y'all are special. You need to give him another hand. He hasn't been to none of them, you know, so he hasn't been to not a one. So except this one. So y'all make sure you go to the museum and buy a book so he can autograph it for you then. This is something special. Two things. Mr. Thomas Plunkett of the NAACP couldn't be here today, and he's on his way to the state NAACP meeting in Natchez, so he asked me to let you know that. So on his behalf, we are just delighted that over the years, all of us who have been advocating that the marker be placed here in honor of Mr. Meredith, that we would just want to make sure that we indicate that he wanted to be here and couldn't be here. And secondly, I want to point out that I am the chair of the task force that has been placing these markers throughout our state. And we placed the first one in Money, Mississippi in honor of the lynching and slaying of Emmett Till. And in this pamphlet, if you don't have one, please get one, because it gives you the list of all the places where we place markers. And of course, I am just especially proud that as the chair of the task force, that we have one now in my home county, and that we have the honoree here today to mark the occasion. Mary Margaret, where are you? Mary Margaret, stand please. Mary Margaret is really responsible for this. Let's give her a rousing round of applause. Is real humble, and obviously our honoree is not, but she is absolutely great. So Mary Margaret, thank you very much for all that you've done and all that you're doing, because this is something special for our state. My last comment is that these markers are educational tools. These markers are symbols of pride in any community. These markers will help to inform our young people. So if you have a young person, a grandkid or a great-grandkid in school in DeSoto County, I hope you will urge their teachers to bring them here to see this marker, to learn about not only the role that Mr. Meredith but the role that unknown, unsung sheroes and heroes in DeSoto County and the other counties played in order to make this a better place for all of us. So this is an educational place, and so bring the young people here so they can witness this unveiling and this marker. I am in just a bit of discomfort. I just left the dentist's office, and ordinarily I would speak much longer. So
Y'all are absolute in luck today. This is your lucky day. Because I need to stop and follow the instructions. I'm not sure where mine came from, but the dentist told me to go home, so I'm going home after this. But we're going to do the unveiling. I want all of the dignitaries and Mr. Meredith to come up so we can do the unveiling.
It's going to come off just as easy as you're ready. It's going to come off just as easy as you're ready to pull. You're going to unveil it. Y'all make it a real easy way to do it.
One, two, three. There we go. Now let's round of applause. There's a lot of information on the back side too, so please make sure you look at the front and the back before you leave. And the folks that have the television cameras, take a look at the back also.
And that's the first time I've ever seen the real reason they got it in. All right.
Mr. Meredith?
Can you stand by next to it for us? About next to it.
Yeah, right
like
there.
this.
Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'll read it later.
The words won't change, believe me.
Perfect.
Beautiful. You want to get on my selfie?
Shot Meredith 3 times, wounding him. Major civil rights leaders, including Stokely Carmichael, Martin Luther King, Floyd Disick, Roy Wilkins, and Whitney Young, converged in Hernando to continue the march to the state capitol. Meredith recovered sufficiently by June 26th to join the rally there, where, along with others, he addressed the largest crowd assembled for the cause of civil rights in the state's history.